So in 2008, I embarked on a 12-day study tour of Israel. You may know this already. And one afternoon, we visited the location where our story today takes place. It occurs near a town called Sosida, also known in Greek as Hippos. And Hippos was part of a collection of 10 Roman cities around the Galilee that together the towns were referred to as the Decapolis. Situated on a hill high above the Galilee, on the day that we visited, we took an afternoon boat trip across the Sea of Galilee. And upon our arrival at the shore, we hiked up to the ancient ruins of the town. And resting at the top, to the left and to the right, there were these long valleys and ridges that plunged their way down into the deep blue water of the sea below. And it was here, in fact, that I took one of my favorite pictures from my trip. I often have it still as a desktop on my computer. But like my journey that day, the scriptures record how Jesus had sailed across from the other side of the Sea of Galilee. But unlike us, as he reached the shore, he was immediately confronted by a crazed, screaming, naked man. Now, the man had at one point lived in the town, we learn, chained and shackled, but realizing that not even the chains could properly control him, they banished him to the tombs outside of the city, where his shrieks, it was said, could be heard throughout the region. Now, I want you to just imagine yourself in the story for a moment, sailing across the sea, and as soon as you get out of the boat, you're met by a man in this condition. What would you do? I mean, I know what I would do. I'd be like, guys, anchor's up, time to go. But Jesus, however, of course, chooses a different path. Instead, Jesus sticks around and he picks a fight. But his fight is not with the man. Instead, Jesus takes a swing at someone we don't even see. You know, rule number one in every single battle strategy is always the same: know your enemy. And as usual, Jesus knows exactly who the enemy is. Though the rest of us do not see him, Jesus does. And the enemy Jesus sees is not the naked and frothing man that's standing in front of him. The real enemy is the enemy that we cannot see. Now, I've discussed this extensively in various settings, but it remains like a message that the church so desperately still needs. In a rationalistic modern world, this notion of spiritual evil is difficult for us to accept, or evil that we cannot see. However, Jesus is very clear about this, that behind evil and corruption and disruption that we see in our world, there is a spiritual reality of evil that is very much at work. You know, N.T. Wright, a scholar, often refers to this as the evil that stands behind the evil. And as with the man in our story, there is something that is standing behind him, something deeper than what meets the eyes. And it's true in our world, in governments, in corporations, in institutions, and in people. And we must understand this so that we can navigate our world effectively and with good discernment. Now, how we address this reality might be varied in each and every situation, but it's folly to misunderstand this reality. There is evil that sits behind the evil that we see. So back to the story. When Jesus confronts the evil spirit, what we watch is it drops the man to his knees and it shrieks at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God?" And this is interesting because to this point in the Gospels have been filled with confusion about who Jesus is. And so it's ironic or interesting that it's the evil spirit that is the one that provides the certainty. The spirit knows who Jesus is. And not only is it certain, it's also terrified because it goes on to say, "Swear to God that you won't torture us." It knows who Jesus is, and it understands the power and authority that Jesus has in the world. Well, as the demon shrieks, Jesus looks at it and asks it its name, to which the spirit replies, "My name is Legion, for we are many." And then he pleads not to be sent away from the area. And Jesus then it appears, interestingly, when you read it at first read, it appears to be this unexpected act of mercy. Jesus then looks over at this nearby herd of pigs and he permits the legion to enter the herd. And at once the 2,000 pigs turn crazed and they hurl themselves down into the sea. And with this then, as the story concludes, the man is seen in his right mind, dressed and healed. It's an incredible story. But we need to understand that there is more for us to see. There is more even here than meets the eyes. Jesus didn't sail to this Roman colony simply to heal the man and to demonstrate his compassion, though he certainly did that. But there is something deeper that is at work. Yes, a man is being healed, but something is also being said about Rome and more broadly about empires and worldly powers. We talked about the Empire of Babylon a couple of weeks ago, for example. In this case, we're encountering another Rome or another empire just by another name. And the story takes place in these Decapolis, the 10 Roman cities in Israel. The demon that is from that area has a Roman name that's linked to the empire and its power. Legion was its name. And Legion was a unit of Roman soldiers comprising 5,000 to 6,000 men. It was a key point of pride and power in the empire. And none of these details are incidental. Something is being said about Rome and more broadly about empires and worldly powers like Babylon. And what we're being shown is that within great and mighty Rome, with all of its legions and power, evil was very much at work. And this evil, as we see demonstrated in this man, had the power to corrupt people to their very core. And this man, as I say, was just one example. So the story then, at least in part, was about pulling back the curtain on the real Wizard of Oz that stands behind Rome. Behind Rome, behind empire, a stinking, lurking fraud was in the shadows. Legion was active within the empire. He still is. The thing is that when Jesus encounters the Roman demon, he takes control and he throws the demon into another Roman symbol, pigs, and they throw themselves into the sea. And this is a point where people often get confused, that the demons ask not to be tortured. And it appears, as I said earlier on, that by throwing them into the pigs, he obliges their request, shows them some mercy, but just the opposite is actually true. By throwing them into the pigs and then causing the pigs to run into the water and drown, he is revealing the destiny of the demonic force of the region. See, the thing is, people thought of the sea as the place of the abyss, as hell, where the ghosts and the powers existed. Legion went running then into hell, where he belongs. The story then is really Jesus' definitive statement on the empire. He sailed to Hippos, this Roman town, to expose something that for all of its might and for all of its power, it too, like his own Jewish people, was under the control of an enemy who was intent on corrupting people to their core. The crazed man was a technicolor example of the enemy's power and purpose, and Jesus' actions was in like manner a demonstration of his own power and his own purpose. He had come to set the world free. And as the story finishes, the man is depicted dressed and in his right mind. But now we watch and read as the townspeople are out of their minds. No reason is given as to why they're angry, but one can guess that the economic damage done by 2,000 drowned pigs might be a plausible answer. The ironic thing, of course, is that there is no acknowledgement of what has just transpired with the local town crazed man. His shrieks would no longer be heard at night, but it appears like no one really cares. They just know that they don't want anything to do with Jesus. They didn't have the eyes to see. And such was the power of the enemy who through Legion had been destroyed, was very much still present in the region. Stuck in their captivity, Jesus agrees with the crowd and he climbs back into the boat, but something that we don't yet see has taken place. A kingdom seed has been planted, a tiny little mustard seed on the side of a Roman hill. And to this seed, Jesus then finishes by giving a simple order. He says to the man, "Go back home and report to everyone what God has done for you." Which is exactly what happened. As Jesus made his way back to Capernaum, the new man made his way then into his town. And here's the other remarkable thing about this story. Then the next time that Jesus visits this region, it is recorded that many of his followers came out to see him. That's an interesting expression, followers. In a Roman town, followers of Jesus, where did they come from? The conclusion is a man crazed on a Galilean hillside becomes the seed for a harvest that leads in that region to followers of Jesus the next time he returns. One last thing. Years later, about 325 AD, the church would gather for the Council of Nicaea. It was the first gathering of the worldwide church. Its outcome was the drafting of what's known as the Nicene Creed, which further clarified the Apostles' Creed that we just studied. Now, what's interesting is that the annals of the council record that one of the 318 participants was a man named, get this, Peter of Hippos. See, a crazed man, redeemed, becomes the seed for a harvest that produces, in the end, one of the early church's most significant figures, not to mention the followers that Jesus had already met. It's just like God, the way God works in our world. That is the end of our teaching series for this season. We'll begin again in September. This summer you've got lots of other teachings that are in our catalog that you can watch. But I'm looking forward to a bit of a break myself. But I trust that you were blessed by today's teaching, and much love to you all.